the Ave Goddess podcast with spiritual detective Dr. Joanna Kujawa and its motto, if you want to be spiritual, ask difficult questions. In this podcast, we discuss Mary Magdalene, the archetypes of the Ave Goddess, new forms of consciousness they inspire, as well as the interconnection between sexuality and spirituality. You can join the conversation by signing to the Ave Goddess podcast, my YouTube channel Dr. Joanna Kujawa, and even better through my book, The Ave Goddess, Mary Magdalene and the Goddesses of Eros and Secret Knowledge, published by Sacred Stories. Today we have a fascinating conversation with Elena Bensonoff, who is the founder of Wholistic Inc, the best-selling author of the Wholistic Wisdom, Awakening Your Inner Healer, and so much more. Hi Elena, such a pleasure to have you here. How are you?
Hi Joanna, it's a pleasure to be here with you.
So I actually came across your work for the first time when I was listening to some podcasts, and my friend directed me towards your work. And in this podcast, you were giving readings of, vibrational readings of different modern and current spiritual gurus and teachers, which I found very interesting, and even more so, the readings of Jesus's disciples and Mary Magdalene. And what really surprised me and delighted me, that we arrived at very similar, identical really, conclusions coming from completely different angles. You through your work on vibrational readings, and I through my research. So I thought I was just so happy when you agreed for this interview, to have this interview with me. So Elena, but before we move on to specifics and Divine Feminine and Mary Magdalene, perhaps you'd like to share with us your own spiritual journey that led you to the work that you do at the moment.
Oh wow, that's a big question to ask. I believe that we're all born spiritual. It's not something that you acquire, but it's something you awaken to realize more and more as you go on the journey in your life. For me, I've always been an extremely sensitive child. I've always felt I could read energies. I didn't know that it was called energies, but I could read, facial features, how my parents, if they were to come home after work, what they were feeling, and it would always impact me in different ways. So I was very, very connected and very aware. It led me into the world of pharmacy. So I was a pharmacist, still licensed and board certified as a pharmacist. Actually, I have several licenses, and then progressed into the field of functional medicine. And that was the year 2007. And I would say that was the year that my life has drastically changed, because as a natural investigator, I wanted to understand the root cause of why people were getting sick, right? And why is it that so many people had so many chronic conditions, and the medical system was truly failing a lot of people by giving them medications to cover up the symptoms, but not really looking at the root cause of an illness. So my natural curiosity took me into exploring the field of energy and quantum medicine. And this is where I would say massive awakening started happening for me, because I realized from experiencing different types of energy practices that we're so much more than the physical body, right? That we are these powerful energy beings experiencing life on Earth. So I would say that has been a journey of self-discovery, and also the depth of trying to understand the nature of our reality, that brought me into the work that I do today with my other half, with my partner Alejandro. And this is reading the vibrational frequencies and levels of consciousness of people and places.
Oh, that's wonderful. And so I was really fascinated by this work, and especially that you can read the vibrational frequencies of people who are not longer with us. So because I guess you measure the spiritual vibration which is present with us still, for example.
Well, this is a great question. So first of all, we have to understand that time is only linear in our reality, right? If you go into the quantum realm, there is no time. So past, present, and future are all existing in the now. And our biofield, which is another word for it, would be the divine field, is a record keeper of all the information. And it is through investigating and reading thousands, really thousands of cases, that we came to realize that this information is stored. It doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't disappear. It doesn't get erased. All the emotions, events, and situations that every being experiences is stored in the biofield. So what we do is we use scalar wave technology to retrieve this information from the field.
Oh, that's wonderful. So, even listening to you, I can feel that this is true because I come from different spiritual traditions. I move on towards more of a Eastern esoteric traditions and moved away from the tradition I was born into, which actually talks that, the world is energy. And they talk about that energy is the Shakti, which is this feminine principle, right? So this is always available for us. But also I really love that you approach it from a more scientific point of view, right? Like we know now, right, with the development of physics, that we are not only physical beings. So I love this interconnection between spirituality and science as well. So, and the nature of reality, right? So exactly why is our perception of time so linear? Because I'm very often frustrated with this, this cause and effect. It feels like a form of a matrix, which is perhaps just our own mental limitation. What do you think?
That's a great question. I would say that depending on your level of consciousness, which is how your reality is constructed, right? How you perceive your reality, that's the matrix you also create for yourself. So yes, the higher your vibration, the more open you become, and in a way become an observer of everything that is without judging it as good or bad, right? Positive or negative. It's recognizing that no one is better than anyone. Everyone plays an important role. When you are able to detach and observe, in a way, you're exiting the very matrix where a lot of people are, what I would call living in a state of hijacking. Because when you are under the frequency of 200, which at this moment of time, humanity is going through what I call the dark night of the soul. Based on our work, we've measured the frequency of the human collective, which is at a frequency of 100, fear. Right? So collectively, we're all going through this fear, whether it's in a small way or a big way, where we've been asked to process this fear that's been in all of us, right, in some shape or form. But when that becomes our reality and the lens through which we perceive our reality, we're allowing to be victims of our reality versus recognizing that we're so much more. And then we're able to transcend that and then experience life in a completely different way.
Yes, but how can we transcend this fear, which is sometimes very unconscious? I know that collectively we definitely experience this fear now, but including myself, although it has nothing to do with COVID for me, strangely enough, but I realized all my life I thought that I was such a courageous person because, I did courageous or maybe even crazy things, but I started to realize that there is this dark corner in my soul which is kind of fear-based, and it's very limiting. So how can we transcend this fear that is somehow almost a part of our being at this stage?
I would say, first of all, it's a great question you ask, because I'm sure every human being listening to this podcast is asking the very same thing. So it's not about feeling the limitation, but feeling perhaps an invitation, because this fear is asking to be seen, to be acknowledged. And perhaps it is those deepest, darkest moments from our childhood, or perhaps ancestral trauma, that also has contributed to what we've inherited as trauma. And recognizing that it is the very shadow that is asking, what is the shadow? That's the first question. What is fear? What is the shadow? I would say it's the lack of light. So the more light the more you bring it to the surface, to the light, and become friends with it, then it's easier to release it and not necessarily attach to it. And it's not that the fear frequency will ever leave the field, because all those frequencies, lower frequencies, higher frequencies, are part of who we are. They're here to invite us, whether we want to play in the light or whether we want to play in the shadow. And it's up to us to make a decision where we want to play out.
That's very interesting. And also, thank you for this. And also, I just want to repeat again that you said a part of the process is becoming a witness. So, and nowadays, especially when the whole society, the whole civilization, human civilization is so polarized, I think more polarized than ever. And I was brought up, because of the nature of my profession, to be really opinionated. So I actually used this as an opportunity not to express my opinions. I just keep repeating, on social media or to myself and my friends, you cannot go there, just witness the situation. You have to stop from dividing, people and, talking against people because of us stand on this or that. So I think that perhaps this kind of dark age is also a great opportunity for us to work on ourselves. Like this, for me, it's the impetus, which is very professional, just don't go there. It's not important whether, you can publish an article or whatever you're trained to do. Just work on it, to witness it, and try to witness it with compassion and some, higher understanding. To observe compassionately what we are going through as human species at the moment.
Yes, and I think that being at a higher frequency, perhaps if you have a frequency of courage, which is 200, and you feel this courageous heart within you, it is very important to view those that are not ready through the lens of compassion. Because they cannot see what you're seeing at this moment, and it's okay.
And it's okay.
So there's a great responsibility that comes with having perhaps a frequency of courage or having the frequency of reason 400 or 500. And that is to understand that not everyone has to be aligned with your belief system, my belief system. Everyone has their own system of belief. So it's really about coming together through the things that we can find in common versus the differences that we have.
So just before we move on to Mary Magdalene and the Divine Feminine, I would just like to share something with you, because as I said, due to my natural inclination, it was always about, I was always a very bookish girl, and I wanted to know. I just wanted to know. I was driving everybody crazy about, but I want to know the truth. So driving my teachers crazy, my spiritual teachers crazy, anyone. And I have learned, to depend completely on my intellectual abilities. And the encounter with the Divine Feminine actually changed that, because I realized that this is not really about reasoning, and I, of course, because of my profession and so on, I felt, that this is the best method, right? Because what is the higher method? And then I started to have spiritual experiences also, and I realized that it is more circular, it is more spiral, it is a completely different way of perceiving reality. But I must say, at the beginning, it felt for me like I was in a dark room. Perhaps like somebody who has become blind for the first time, because I was so dependent on, on a sharp mind. And suddenly, like, the lights, when I had the deepest initiation to a spiritual tradition, it's like the lights were turned off and you cannot rely on your mind anymore, and the world is upside down. And this is when actually I was able to have experiences of a deeper reality, which is of course part of our reality. So sometimes perhaps you have to let go of what is your gift, I don't know, right? To be able to respond to the richness of reality, right? Because otherwise we just perceive reality through the same lenses all the time.
Yeah, you've just described what we talk about often, which is the difference between IQ and the EQ, the intellect versus intelligence. And I come from a very intellectual background as well. For me, education has been the driving force. And I tend to rely on it quite a lot. And that's the masculine part that exists within all of us, the reason and the logic. And when I went into the realm of energy and quantum medicine, started working with people on an intuitive level, that was a big wake-up call for me. And also the recognition to trust the intelligence, which is the guiding force that is the part of the fabric of the universe, right? It is what guides our cells, some cells to be liver cells, kidney cells, right? There's some divine intelligence that is orchestrating this whole thing, and it is not linear. So, and it takes a lot of practice to trust that. And that's the difference between the intelligence and the intellect, which so many of us are trained. And I would say modern day in society, we're trained in school to trust the intellect. You know, how many books have you read? Which I think there's nothing wrong with it. It's great. But it's also recognizing that at some point it becomes limited.
That's right. Limitation. I started to perceive it as a limitation. I think, oh, actually, you know, this is just a very narrow path, and you know, just a little bit like a horse with the blinders on, right? When the perspective can open up, but you have to have again, I guess, the courage to just walk into this what feels like darkness at the beginning because you have no previous experience of that. And I think with this, we basically walking into the field of divine consciousness and goddess, what I call sometimes goddess consciousness, because I have discovered that this is a different form of consciousness. And I began to ponder, you know, why we need this consciousness nowadays, because it seems that our society is going too far in the other direction of the masculine form of consciousness, which we both practice, right? At the beginning, and this is taking us towards transhumanism, you know, and joining with machines and so on, and this is really scary. I intuitively know that we are going in the wrong direction. So this field of divine consciousness and divine feminine is very close to both you and me, and I really loved your recent blog when you were writing about Mary Magdalene and how you read her vibrational frequencies, and maybe you would like to say something about it, you know, how something about the reading, you know, where she stands in the spectrum of spiritual development.
So it's been, for me, it's also been fascinating how the world has, or the history has managed to delete the very core essence of the creation itself. If you think about what is part of creation, you know, we're all birthed from a mother, from a female, and we can't disregard that as less relevant, less important. What is the female? It's the nurture, right? The open heart, the unconditional love, the intuition. So for us, it was important to read the frequencies, of course, of Mary Magdalene, just exactly as we read the frequencies of her identical counterpart, Emmanuel, or Yeshua, known as Jesus Christ. And we wanted to see, were they truly equal? Because the history had a tendency of erasing her, right? Or demoralizing her. And what was fascinating in our findings is she was identical, true, identical frequency to Emmanuel, Jesus Christ. She is what would be called in some traditions an avatar, the pure consciousness of 1000, which is remarkable. She's 100% aligned with her divine personal purpose, 100% in integrity with herself, to others. She is a being that I felt was time after, of course, our findings, but I've had this connection with her for quite a few years now. And I felt it was time to reveal who she really is through our work, because she's been hidden and erased for over 2,000 years, and it was time to bring her back. And this is really an awakening and reemergence of the divine feminine essence that is desiring to come out through each and every human being. So this is not just a one female. Yes, she was a living being with a high frequency, but she's someone that lives within each and every one of us. It's, as you said, it's that dark space that sometimes is so difficult to walk into because we've been trained to trust the logic and the linear thinking. And she's here to invite people to trust into the intelligence and the consciousness of what is, the intuition, the heart essence, and the beauty.
When you speak like that, it really opens up my heart, because this confirms my own research and my intuition. So as I say, it's just really beyond wonderful for me to hear what you're saying, because it confirms my own intuitions. And I would like to ask you, because I just also, when I was writing my book, I was looking at maybe previous goddesses, from other traditions, but even Western traditions, and that some of them had very similar qualities, at least the similar symbolism as Mary Magdalene. So as you say, she is part of each of us, but perhaps, do you think it's possible that this energetic field that she is reincarnated also perhaps in other times under different names, of other goddesses?
Absolutely, yes. We haven't read all the goddesses. I think this is the episode that we're going to release soon. But I can tell you, because we've read quite a few, what we would call avatars at a frequency of 1,000, we've seen this pattern already repeated in somebody like Hermes, right? Hermes, who created the Babylonian astrology, which is fascinating. We actually just read his frequency, and it is an identical frequency to her and also to the Emmanuel Jesus Christ. So absolutely, it leads us to believe that it's a reincarnation and a similar frequency that emerges throughout different times to awaken humanity, to realize something. So it would be fascinating. I would be interested to getting a list from you on goddesses so we can put this episode together. I think this will be amazing.
That would be fantastic, thank you, because this is what I was doing in my book. And actually, because as we speak of frequencies, I went at certain point to Jerusalem, and I had this Jerusalem talking about frequency reading. It is an amazing place, and nothing strange when people say something about Jerusalem fever, or people lose their minds, but I think they actually, yes, lose their minds in a good way, right? Because the minds are open up to a completely different reality. So I was probably one of those people, it was a very emotional experience for me, and I wasn't prepared for this, because I was, then such an intellectual, so I was taken away from my own delusions. But I was in this church of Saint Mary Magdalene, which was a Russian Orthodox church. I just simply went there because it was such a beautiful architecture. And then there was this painting representing Mary Magdalene when she stands, not the penitent Mary Magdalene that is often, especially in Christian churches portrayed, but she is standing, in her power, but not assertive like nowadays people do it, but just completely peacefully in her power. And with her hand extended towards, us, the viewers, and she had this egg in her hand. And of course, there's a kind of medieval legend, which I will not discuss it now, but I thought, no, she's actually standing there with her hand extended towards us with a gift, this divine consciousness. And then I started to look into the symbolism of goddesses, especially in the West, but also in esoteric Hinduism. And there's a whole list of goddesses, and I would love to do this with you, because, giving this other vibrational and higher perspective, that actually are portrayed with the same symbols. So it is even in art, she's portrayed with the same symbols, with a hand extended, with an egg, or with a skull, dressed in red. And so she is telling us, I am the same person, I have something to teach you, right? So I would be really, really interested in this podcast that you plan, and I'm happy to share, the list of the goddesses, because it really, it was a great discovery for me. But I would really love to hear your perspective on this. So also in your blog, which I really loved actually, because 2nd of February you were talking about, and you're doing some is it a proper name to call it numerological, or is it more?
Yeah. For me, I love different symbolism. I think symbolism is important. So yes, today is actually 2/2/2022. Yes. So absolutely, and today is the 33rd day of the year.
So it's amazing, So, and I also was So I really loved it. So I just want you to maybe elaborate a little bit on the significance of 153, 153, that you did some calculation on her name. Is it what it was? And it said, you said that her number is 153.
I think it's based on the numerology of her name, right? Which is the
Yes,
153.
yes.
Um,
Of Hebrew
so
letters. I'm sorry, you said of Hebrew letters, yeah?
yes. Yeah, there's a whole science of actually where people can do numerology on the names, but all of it really has to do with these numbers of 222, right? And ultimately it goes down to the number 2, which is the number of partnerships. And this is really what I would say Mary Magdalene is here to awaken the realization, to the partnership, first of all, that is marrying the masculine and the feminine energy within us, the partnership that we have with ourselves, and then the world is an expression of that. So it's an invitation to unite, especially at this time on earth when there's so much polarity, as you said a couple of minutes ago, so much separation. She's here to remind us in the most noble way. I also feel that the divine feminine over the last few years has been definitely distorted with sexual innuendos and all these goddesses, I would say in the shadow way of embodying the goddess energy. And I feel that she stems in a very, very noble way, to invite people to truly connect to their heart essence, to their core, trust their intuition, and really walk from their heart.
I absolutely agree with you, and I agree with you that there is a people are searching for the divine feminine energy, but in wrong places, I would say, and they get lost in investigating the shadow side of this energy. And perhaps actually completely, I would argue, misinterpreting this energy, from their own level of understanding. And and uh, and I always tell people, just don't go there, or perhaps it needs to be explored, but it has to be explored from a completely different level of consciousness and understanding. Rather than going into the shadow part of the divine feminine. And I really loved in your blog when you spoke the divine feminine is both in men and women. And this is what I always say as well. I'm saying I investigate goddess energy and goddess consciousness, but it is in both of us. It's in the feminine and masculine principle. And it's a little bit like Jungian, really, perspective. Carl Jung, the psychoanalyst, who was saying everybody has the masculine and feminine in them in different ratios, right? And and in one of the gospels, I think basically Jesus is saying that I made him male. So, but by this he meant, brought up the energy of masculine and feminine into the same level, right? In Mary Magdalene, and and the same was true, I believe, of Jesus, that he had a perfect ratio. I don't know, I'm just guessing because you do the work. Perfect ratio, perfect balance between the masculine and feminine energy, right? And it's probably.
Yes, absolutely. And I will say that the masculine energy within us is the intellect, and that's the investigative nature that brought you to do the research and investigation into your work, right? And to discovery. But then it's about allowing for the intelligence to guide you to discover more. And that is the part that is important for all of us to remember, that we need both in order to navigate the realms that we are living through and we are feeling through. So the intellect cannot be discarded, but the intelligence is a much more powerful way, right? So, but intellect can only take you so far for the intelligence to open up, unfold, and bring magic into what's there.
Yes, I absolutely agree, because I think that our civilization actually came to a dead end with the intellect, simply because we completely disregarded what you call intelligence. And when I think about other goddesses, for example, goddess Sophia, and really any goddess also from Eastern tradition like Parashakti and so on, they actually represent this, what is called higher wisdom, the holistic wisdom. And we completely forgot this form of wisdom. We just basically calculate and are somehow caught up in this very rational way of being. And I really love that you say we do not have to discard the reason, right? We just have to marry it with this higher intelligence, of this different form of intelligence. We don't have to grade it really, right? Different form of intelligence, which is hidden really under the divine feminine, and Mary Magdalene for us represents this. And personally, I believe that we really need it nowadays, not only for our own individual evolution, but for our collective evolution. Because I just have this intuition again that we are at the crossroads as a civilization, and it really is up to us which way we are going to go. What do you think about that?
I would say that somehow I feel that we, based on our testing last year, that we are actually walking as humanity collectively the divine path. We're very aligned, even through the dip down. And this is really an invitation for the collective to clear out this fear, hopefully once and for all, in order to rise. So this massive separation and the polarity we're all experiencing at the moment is an invitation to really, for each individual to step truly into which aspect it is that we've been feeling shameful about, we've been feeling fear about, we've been feeling guilty about, and having, as you said in the very beginning, the compassionate lens, which is what Mary Magdalene is here to invite us to do, is to have the compassionate lens of a noble heart, to say it's okay, and to let go, right, of all of the fears that we have, in order to step into the courage and then move into this heart consciousness, which, based on our testing year 2046, is taking us into this heart consciousness of the collective. So I'm very curious how that shift is going to happen. It's going to happen in our lifetime. We've also looked into the new generations. So the younger children that are being born at the moment, they're called the Alpha generation, between 2013 and 2025, they're coming in at a much higher frequency. So somehow humanity is also bringing these noble souls in, and it's going to take an open heart for us to really nourish those souls so they can lift the human collective up.
I love this positive ending to our conversation, because then it gives us something to look forward and also to work on ourselves. And from my perspective, to trust the process. Do not try to figure it out. Trust this process, which perhaps also involves surrender, another very difficult thing, right? So thank you so much, Elena. How can our listeners connect with you?
Yes, thank you, Joanna. Yes, they can connect with me through my website, wholistic.com, WHOLISTIC.
And I will also leave this link under the write-up for this podcast. So if anyone would like to ask for a session with Elena and Alejandro, you have a immediate link here. And with this, we end our podcast. If you enjoyed the conversation, sign in to the Other Goddess podcast. You can find similar conversation on my YouTube channel, Dr. Joanna, and consider buying my book, The Other Goddess, Mary Magdalene and the Goddesses of Eros and Secret Knowledge. Until next time.